Welcome back to FreightWaves Now. We're on to our next guest here. We're going to talk a little bit about robotics with KG Ganapathy, founder and CEO of Vimaan Robotics. KG, welcome to the show.
Thank you, Thomas. How are you? Thank you, Anthony. How are you?
We're doing well here. So excited to talk to you because this is a space that I've been watching closely. We're talking warehousing that's really been, I think, overdue with some updates needed, especially during this time within the supply chain. Can you tell us a little bit about what's the biggest thing that is needed for this warehouse and your approach to fixing some of those things?
Yeah, so when you look at warehouses, especially in the context of robotics and what has been going on over the last decade or so, it is pretty evident that the whole ecosystem is moving towards robotics. But the interesting thing that if you dissect it further and you look at the details, all of that robotics has been traditionally more or less focused on one thing, which is material movement. Whether you look at AMRs or whether you look at goods to person or whether it is autonomous forklifts, it really has been focused on moving items from point A to point B and therefore removing the labor content of that movement. But what I think has been overlooked so far is the notion of inventory visibility and inventory accuracy. It's not really that helpful if you have a robot going to a location expecting to find something item, and then now the robot doesn't know what to do. So and you've got the human. So we saw a fairly significant opening in the opportunity to identify, validate, verify, and track inventory and ensure its accuracy across the warehouse. And that's what Vimaan is all about.
I think you raise a great point. A lot of companies in this space are focusing on the process of moving the items, but even from my experiences in trucking, it's one thing to unload the items, it's another thing to actually count them and then see if you have everything you need. This can take even 1 to 2 hours at large distribution centers. Based on that, what are some of the key things we need to think about with what y'all are working on how to count it? Are there any differences than just traditionally just moving the product to the shelves?
There are really no differences. The notion of computer vision has gotten so advanced now, and of course it's continuing to advance every day. But if you subscribe to the theory that you just capturing a barcode on an item is just not good enough. A barcode is such a tiny representation of that item, and to your point, if an associate just scans an item and scans the barcode on that item, that is an assumption that that item actually went through that event. But having computer vision actually track that item, measure it, look at whether it's damaged, verify that it's the right item, look at the serial number, for example. All of these things are aspects that you don't find in the barcode. So computer vision actually gives you a tremendously increased level of dimensionality in terms of how you represent and how you archive an event and how you verify and ensure the accuracy and the quality of a transaction.
AG, the first thing that pops into my mind when I think of this technology being utilized, of course, is warehousing and, of course, the growth of e-commerce. And so when you look at the implication of this technology, when you look at growing, is this the area that you really are looking at really targeting here?
Yeah, very much so, although I will emphasize that this is not limited to e-commerce, right? Let me give you a few examples. In an e-commerce site, you have obviously thousands and thousands of vendors sending items into the warehouse every single day, and millions of items leaving that warehouse to go to consumers. And the process of receiving these items manually, scanning every single one of them, and receiving them can entirely be replaced by automated computer vision systems, which not only capture the item, but verify and validate it against an incoming ASN or a database, And similarly, as you pack and ship, if you're able to track a packing slip and say these are the items that are supposed to be in that packing order, and I'm going to validate that the packing was done correctly, that the right items were in the right location or the right box, and the right address was applied to it, you can now ensure without adding human labor, in fact, by removing a lot of human labor, uh, you can ensure the quality of what you shipped, and you can also maintain archives of what you've shipped in case there are future claims. This is an example in the e-commerce application. Let me talk about a distribution center, for example. A distribution center would, it often has picks that occur where pallets are filled up. You have cases that are picked from various locations and they're combined into pallets. These pallets are shipped from, let's say, a distribution center into a retail store. But the accuracy of those shipments is always in question. There are a lot of chargebacks that occur because somebody didn't get the right items in the right shipment. But moreover, there are often times where people or associates are spending time looking for that item. And so a lot of hours go into research trying to find that item in a huge distribution center warehouse. And because you cannot find it on time, that truck is sitting at the door dock waiting to leave because it doesn't have that last pallet. Because today, every retailer demands on time in full, what's known as OTIF, right? So that's an example of how we would ensure accuracy as well as highly productive workforces in a distribution center. Because now, if you have inventory that's accurate, you don't have to spend that amount of time looking for items in that warehouse. I'll give you a third example. In warehouses that are co-located with manufacturing facilities or assembly lines, including in automotive or food and beverage, we have often seen that an assembly line can actually come to a halt because somebody had to feed that assembly line with the right item from that warehouse. But if that associate goes to that location, doesn't find that item that he's supposed to find, or he finds the wrong item and he takes the wrong item unknowingly, that assembly line has to stop. So there are just so many ways in which there is, waste is introduced, inefficiency is introduced, lack of productivity is introduced because of the inability to maintain an accurate inventory count.
I really like what you're talking about, how manufacturing and distribution. Sometimes with the large beverage manufacturers, you have the bottling process, the filling process, the wrapping, the packaging, and then finally it eventually gets loaded onto a truck. Well, the driver doesn't understand why it takes 5 to 6 hours to get loaded, but with what you're telling me, the situation really is sometimes these guys just don't know exactly the materials and how much they're making, and like you said, it'll actually stop the whole line, correct?
That's exactly right. And we have seen that occur often. They sometimes intentionally ship the wrong items simply to get the truck out the door, knowing fully well that it's either going to get destroyed or it's going to come back. So if you think about the waste that happens between the reverse logistics and the human productivity and the environmental damage, that is really those are all the impacts of having a much more accurate inventory count. You could even look at it further, right? If you have computer vision that can track items, and you're now able to track expiry dates on whether it's pharma or whether it's biomedical or devices, which you're shipping out the door, I would much rather ship something that is expiring, sooner rather than shipping something that's expiring later. But barcodes don't track that. So if you have the ability to actually capture an expiry date, that could also add to your elimination of waste.
So, KG, I had a chance to look around on your website, and one of the things that I saw, of course, was that you can deliver 100% inventory accuracy, and I have to know, how is this possible?
Yeah, great question. Great question. So, one of the really powerful elements of the Vimaan technology is that we sit right alongside a WMS. We don't replace a WMS. We don't write into the WMS. But what we do is let me give you an example, right? If let's say we are capturing inventory on the warehouse racks, we see an item and we say, this is where we're capturing this item. This is the barcode. This is the item description, and it is in this location. But when we compare it against the warehouse management system database, if the database says it's in a different location, we simply highlight that discrepancy to the warehouse operators and to the warehouse clerks. Because we say, look, there is a problem. We are seeing that this is in a different location. Here is an image of it, and here's the details of it. You can decide whether you want to override the WMS and correct it, or whether for some reason Vimaan could be wrong. We are, very rarely we could be wrong, but we give the warehouse clerk, that associate, that opportunity to correct it. In the similar way, incoming, receiving items, we compare them against an ASN, and we provide the clerk with that tool, that ability, and we highlight that 1 or 2% of the items where we found the discrepancies so that they can resolve it. So what that does is, on an everyday basis, on a constant, near real-time basis, if we are giving them those alerts of all the discrepancies we're finding, essentially you can think of it as an extremely targeted quality auditing tool, where instead of randomly auditing 5% of the warehouse, we are telling you that this is the 1 or 2 or 5% you should look at, because we know that there are problems here, or we believe there are problems here. The warehouse worker can then adjudicate that, fix it, and that automatically allows them to get to 100% accuracy.
I think that was a really interesting point, and definitely looking forward to seeing how not only your technology progresses, but how this can also cause, real savings, especially in the warehousing and manufacturing spaces. Thank you so much, sir, for coming on the show as well. You can check them out, KG Ganapathy at Vimaan Robotics, and looking forward to having you on again.
Thank you, Thomas and Anthony, for having me on.